Several major news stories just came to light this weekend that are very important to Tesla. First, yesterday, a Chinese AI company, DeepSeek, shocked everyone with a new LLM that has now matched OpenAI's O1 performance, with apparently only using 2,000 GPUs at a budget of just $6 million. Did China just leapfrog the US in a race to AI? How does this impact Tesla? And does this mean they'll solve full self-driving first? We'll review Elon's replies. Second, there are reports that full self-driving is now being tested in China, and that FSD approval in China is on track for this quarter. Plus, the latest versions of FSD is now rolling out to AI4 cars, and Tesla's AI executive Phil Dwan said prepare to be shocked. Third, Tesla's new Model Y was launched in the US and Europe this weekend. We have the full list of all the new features and changes. Finally, we'll take a look at the potential path for the US to replace the existing IRA incentives with a new Made in the US credit for batteries and potentially vehicles. This will benefit companies like Tesla and battery maker EOS. Jeff Lutz, ex-CVP of Supply Chain and Chief Quality Officer, now CEO of his own supply chain consulting firm, is joining us today. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, Herbert. I thought we could just take the entire show and do deep breathing exercises. I think everybody just needs to relax. We'll break all this stuff down and make sense of it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we're going to do a full deep dive on this DeepSeek show for tomorrow morning's show. Take a look at that. There's a lot of things we're going to break down. Who owns them? How likely it is what they're saying true or not true. Today, we're going to show what Elon is saying about DeepSeek right now. So let me just set the stage here. This is what we're talking about. There's a new LLM called DeepSeek that is a Chinese lab. They're positioning themselves as a small research lab. Launched this new intelligent AI assistant, and it's rocketed to the top of the charts because it's open source. The way they position it, it's already on par with OpenAI's O1. It's fully open source, and it's really low priced. So if you can look at their stats here, this is DeepSeek versus OpenAI, and they're saying based on different kinds of tests, they're basically on par with OpenAI. That's just another way to look at it. I won't. This is just the numbers of what we just saw there. But in terms of that list, DeepSeek is already, like in this case, the fourth best in this list. So this is it, open source. This is their cost. They're saying how much it costed them. So this is potentially a big leap forward. Andre Caprathi said this in December. He said, it's a Chinese AI company making it look easy with an open weights release of a frontier grade LLM trained on a budget, on a joke of a budget. Apparently, don't know if this is true, but this is what DeepSeek's saying. They only use 2,000 GPUs for 2 months, $6 million. Andre says, for reference, this level of capability is supposed to require clusters of closer to 16,000 GPUs. And the ones that are being brought up today are 100,000 GPUs. And then it seems to be doing well. That would be very impressive if it's true. Does this mean you don't need large GPU clusters for frontier LLMs? No, but you have to ensure that you're not wasteful with what you have. This is what he said in December. So Jeff, why don't we, before we go on to what other people are saying countering it, what's your reaction to this?
Yeah, I think it's important to absorb information and look at everything in context. And we're on this show, we're not going to go conspiracy theory in either direction, supporting or we're just going to go through, I think, some relevant points, I think, of what's important. I just think there's missing information. So for me, it doesn't cause me to run in one direction or another. When you're dealing with these types of business exercises and deals and just trying to understand what's happening there, you really need to understand what information is critical and important. And you either have it, you don't have it, or you have pieces of it with some level of certainty. And I think there's critical things that we're fundamentally missing. And there's a couple of things, I think, to just bring this up to a very high level. We don't know how this was don't know how this was trained, because there are things that have been said, and then when you actually read their technical paper, it leaves the door open to many other things that, and I'll quote, it says the $6 million does not include costs. This is from their research paper. Costs associated with prior research and ablation experiments. This is, basically eliminating things from the model to make it more accurate. So it doesn't include prior research and ablation experiments on architectures, algorithms, and data. And again, this is from their technical paper. This is basically, this is a lot. And they could have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on and trained on larger clusters, prior to this. And they have earlier papers that referenced a greater than 10,000 unit A100 cluster. So, I mean, there are competing pieces of information directly lifted from the research paper if people go do the due diligence. The other thing I always like to approach these things from my experiences that come on the show, and I'm not trying to step up and say I'm an AI expert or not, but I do have expertise in supply chain. And this whole concept of export controls, I think, is important to explain to people. United States put export controls on certain levels of AI silicon to China, and they've also put export controls on the equipment that makes certain types of silicon as well. So if you're trying to control a gigantic piece of lithography equipment or some other test apparatus, those things are easier to control both on the outbound and inbound portion. But when you're talking about GPUs and you're talking about smaller devices, let's say, export controls in general are difficult to basically for them to actually work. It's very difficult to confirm that they're actually working. If you look at NVIDIA sales, about 58% of NVIDIA sales are to APAC, and about 20% of it flows through Singapore, this hub. And everybody knows, and this goes back to prior restrictions and export controls I've worked through in the past, that there are large gray markets that form that can be significant in size in terms of where these things can be sourced from. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's fact. That's study export controls, study prior controls, and you'll know that these things are showing up in places that they're quote unquote not supposed to be. And just finally, and we'll get to more of this in when we do the deeper dive. I find it interesting that the United States decided to control the hardware and the silicon via export control, or think they're controlling it, but not actually control these frontier model algorithms and these frontier models and data that ChatGPT, the ChatGPT 4 is trained like. So the Chinese have access to. So we're saying you can't have access to the silicon, but we are allowing access to the models that we spent all of this money to train and bought all the silicon to do our own training. Those were left open. So I think there's a lot here to unpack.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, you do have the experience, and that's why I'm looking forward to doing the second show we'll publish tomorrow, deep dive. Today, what I just wanted to cover is high level. Is this a threat to Tesla? Is this a threat to the US?
Exactly.
Let's take a look at what Elon says. That's what we'll cover today. Appreciate that, Jeff. So let's take a look at whether or not this is what they're saying is even real. Here's what Elon said about it. So there's this video that went out when this guy, Alexander Wang, he's the CEO of a company called Scale AI. And he basically said, DeepSeek is probably not telling you, but they have 50,000 NVIDIA H100s. They can't talk about it because the US export controls you were just talking about are in place. And then Elon replied to this post saying, obviously. So clearly Elon is, whether you want to position conspiracy theorists or not, but it's pretty obvious to Elon that they did not do this based on what they just said, a small little 2,000 GPUs.
The Chinese labs, they have more H100s than people think. And these
are the highest powered NVIDIA chips that they were not supposed to have.
Yes. My understanding is that DeepSeek has about 50,000 H100s, which they can't talk about, obviously, because it is against the export controls that the United States has put in place. And I think it is true that, I think they have more chips than other people expect, but also.
Okay. And then there's this, Mark Benioff believes them, right? Says, or believes DeepSeek. DeepSeek's now number one in the App Store, surpassing ChatGPT. No NVIDIA supercomputers or $100 million needed. The real treasure of AI isn't the UI or the model. They've become commodities. The true value lies in data and metadata. The oxygen fueling AI's potential, the future's fortune. It's our data, deep gold. So I think he's saying that, watch out, DeepSeek is real. This guy asks, Mark, you take the claims that this was done on a shoestring at face value? And Elon replied saying, LMAO, laugh, 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 laugh. No, this was not true. So that's Elon's position on this. What do you think, Jeff?
Well, yeah, Elon would have a very good feel for this, again, both from the language model, call it chatbot perspective, which this is built off of in his work with XAI and building that from the ground up. And of course, his work on general intelligence related to physical AI and moving vehicles and eventually humanoid robots through the world, which we're going to talk about, which is a very data and engineering intensive exercise and not connected to what we're speaking about here. So yeah, I mean, Elon is clearly skeptical in terms of what happens. Elon has a huge team. I think these are the things that are unwritten. Elon has a gigantic team on the ground, and he is connected to all levels. But besides his own Tesla team, he is connected all over China, and there are different communication channels and pieces of information that can be acquired. So, I mean, I would, in terms of CEOs that speak out on this, I would listen to the CEOs that are in the room where it happens, kind of thing, not to do the Hamilton reference, but Elon is literally in the data center. He is literally there. He's literally part of, if you've listened to people like Gavin Baker, he's literally leading the conversations and the root cause analysis and innovation around, like, how do you get larger clusters to be coherent now that Tesla and XAI have the largest coherent clusters out there. And when people thought you couldn't get beyond 30,000, Elon literally goes in and solves this with his team, and he's leading that conversation. So he is a hands-on, extremely technical, of all the Mag 7 CEOs, in terms of their technical capability. I mean, I would put him, Jensen Huang, and Mark Zuckerberg up there, and kind of in terms of, like, they could be in the room where a lot of this work happens and understand it firsthand. Not to take away from any of the others. Sundar's obviously very technical as well, but you have to. A lot of them haven't spoken out. Some have, and I think Elon has a fairly good feel of what happened here. Again, Alexander Wang also extremely technical. Herbert, I think you should look at the perm, by the way, potentially.
Sure.
If I had hair, I would. But it just in general, I think you have to, like, discern, like, where are you getting information from. This flooded media all over the weekend, and I think you really have to distill, like, okay, you can just immediately dismiss it, or you can say, like, here's the information that's been presented. Here's what the company actually published. You read it, you try to understand it. And like I said, I just read a quote from it in terms of, when you really break down what happened here, it's not clear that the entire thing end to end was done on 6 million. In fact, it's highly unlikely that it was done when you actually break down the information, read what's in the paper. But it's a very easy, quick take. Hot Twitter X is just full of, like, I got to get a hot take out. I got to get a hot take out there, and I'm guilty of it too. But these are things you have to step through, because it has significant impacts in terms of how these things are managed and funded in the future. So let the data come out, analyze it, understand what you know, what you don't know. But I think it's very, like, that quote I read from their research paper, I think is very, their technical paper, I think is very important. And also the background you gave it, this is a hedge fund. I mean, again, you start trickling into conspiracy theory side, but again, hedge funds try to control, the sentiment and information on a particular thing. So there is real positive, really good things I think that can be extracted from this work, but you have to like understand what's done, and you have to separate it and then see where it goes. And then same thing too, back on the export controls. So, and that's what Alexander was really touching upon, is that these things are there, like, they're there. NVIDIA knows. I mean, this is the other thing. This is the thing, I think, where people are taking a big risk. NVIDIA could come out later and say, hey, look, like, before the export controls went into place, X company received, this company received X amount of GPUs from us at these varying part numbers. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of risk people are taking by just, acting very quickly, but I'm not giving, people investment advice. They can do what they want, but let this one play out for a couple of days.
Okay. There's a lot of nuance here, right? It could be true that they did have they had some sort of breakthrough in efficiency of not using as much as most people do. But I trust Elon. I know that he knows, and maybe he'll learn something from here, but it's not this giant gap. One of the things I want to talk to you about is, how does this impact Tesla? There are people now taking that at face value. DeepSeek came out, such a low price. China's in the game. They're going to compete against the US. They're going to compete against Tesla. So now there's people that will say this: DeepSeek is making me rethink about FSD. The Chinese may solve autonomy first. I hate to admit it.
Yeah, I mean, just show me the 2 million cars on the road that have been gathering data for years. And I think once you get past that nuance, you realize that to build AGI, you need the engineering horsepower, you need the data, and that's where Tesla is in the lead. This has been widely published, including by the Chinese automotive CEOs as well. And you also need the hardware solution as well in the vehicle. And you've heard many of the Chinese CEOs. Some agree, some don't agree with Tesla, but many comment on the low cost structure of their approach. So I don't think it translates. Actually, I don't think you come up with a real world, 2-ton device moving through the world at the snap of a finger. But I think once it is solved, and once, the question is what's open sourced and what isn't. Tesla's data is not. Tesla's data is Tesla's data at this point. So I don't see any of that changing overnight. And I would say if you hear the interviews from the automotive CEOs in China, they would tell you something very similar, something very respectful of what Tesla is doing.
I agree with you. That's where I lean towards as well. It's a very small potential that they're going to improve in full self-driving. You need the data, which they don't have. Let's talk full self-driving next. There are rumors, and actually, some people that we trust here are saying that FSD is rolling out, or at least being tested in China. This guy, Chris Zhang, said that he received a 5-second FSD video. He did not share that. Despite careful blurring of all the key details, one specific detail still confirms to him that the video was filmed in China. Tesla is conducting public road testing and validation of FSD in China. So that's what he's saying. He saw a video that says that. And then this guy, Zhongwen, we watch him read the kind of comments on social media in China, and he's confirming he believes that we can expect Tesla FSD to be approved in China in the first quarter, which is still on track. What's your thoughts on those two rumors?
Yeah, I don't think people realize that the FSD impact in China is going to be many times greater than it is in the United States. The accident rate, it's not, first off, the data is not captured very well, but it's kind of more widely known, especially if you spend a lot of time in the country, that there are a lot of very serious traffic accidents that occur in China. Some of it's due to just the quality of roads, which have vastly improved, by the way. But some of it is just due to driver behavior. Some of it's just due to a number of different things. But the gap that FSD can close in terms of safety in China, it can be enormous. And the other thing is the Chinese people tend to be a little bit more tech forward in terms of adopting these things and wanting to bring them into their daily lives sooner. And other countries as well have demonstrated that. So there's a couple million cars on the road. It's a equivalent, if not bigger, region for Tesla than even the US. So an FSD approval in China is a very, very big deal for Tesla. And it's a very big deal for China if they can have a generalized autonomy solution out there in terms of safety. I think you are going to have, with the number of cars and with the driving behavior out there, I think you may have more incidents, but I think FSD won't be at fault, in those situations. So this will be interesting to see how it plays out. I think it's imminent. I think Tesla's told us in the first half of 2025, which is this year or the early part, that they expect this to be approved. And the other thing to keep in mind is, Tesla is a very good corporate citizen, and Elon is in a very good position with the Chinese government. So from a regulatory perspective, even with the noise that's going back and forth, and so far, I would say in the Trump administration, China and President Trump have gotten off to a good start. Xi Jinping called him on day one. They had a good conversation. They both put out statements after the conversation that saying we're going to figure out a way to work together. Now that could change tomorrow, but it started. My point is, it started off on a good foot, and there's a lot to be gained for both countries. Remember, we just talked about export restrictions on not only on AI chips or GPUs themselves, but on the equipment that makes a lot of advanced silicon. And so it's going to be interesting to see how all that's a huge bargaining chip on the side of the US. China as well has huge bargaining chips on their side. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out.
Okay. So both of these are rumors still, but we'll keep a close eye to see whether or not we see Chinese media reporting on whether or not FSD is testing on Chinese roads and whether or not FSD approval is on track. But maybe we'll learn more about it in just 2 days from now when we get the earnings call. They hopefully will reply to this. In the meantime, we do have news now that FSD, the newest version, 13.2.5, has started rolling out to owners with AI4. The first wave has started coming out. Not sure that there's anything here that I saw from this release notes. I don't see anything here that was anything new necessarily. But what's really cool was, they really did already merge it so that one stack, one software can update. Now, in this case, AI4 cars, Cybertruck and Y, but also could be used to update the AI3 cars too if they needed to. Reports on unknown. Now, here's interesting. A Tesla AI executive, Phil Dwan, replied to this. This guy was saying, FSD is not remotely close to Waymo right now. It's behind by at least 100 times. It's getting better, but scaling laws cannot do its magic with fixed amount of compute. This is based on using both regularly. So he's saying he's using both FSD and Waymo, and he still believes FSD is far behind. This is my experience in San Francisco Bay. I have to make daily interventions on the Model 3. He didn't say which computer, but he did say that it's whether it's AI3 or AI4, but he did say that he is using version 13. Waymo, you can basically go to sleep. Now, again, he's not taking into consideration that there are teleoperators there. Tesla does feel generally safe in terms of understanding the environment and avoiding collision. It's true that Tesla's way ahead in geographical coverage, but 99% FSD on 100% of roads is of limited value. I would be shocked and delighted if it managed to get to Waymo level safety without hardware changes. I'm long Tesla. And by the way, when he then confirms it, he's talking about more about lane changes, not critical disengagements, by the way. But here's the cool part. Phil Dwan, Tesla AI in charge of FSD, he replied saying, prepare to be shocked. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like the confidence. And, this person's statement, it's fine. By the way, it's fine to be critical. I would just try to be as fact-based as possible to say it's 100x different. I mean, what's the metrics? What are we looking at? And then we don't know if it's hardware 3 or 4. I know the lane change aspect for me, I'm on 13.2.4. So that you showed the .5 and the .51 are the ones that are rolling out to early testers now. I saw a huge leap in improvement in lane selection going from V12 to 13. And then from call it, to 13.2.2 to 4, I've seen another kind of big improvement where it is now on city driving. For me, it is getting into lanes where I wouldn't have made those lane changes, but it puts me in a lane that puts me ahead of traffic faster, and then it's getting me over in time to make the turn. So I'm not seeing the similar awkward. I did see that behavior before that the gentleman is describing, but I'm not seeing it now on the more recent releases. So yeah, and the other thing is he says fixed amount of compute. We're not operating. We haven't used the whole cluster, and we haven't used the whole model size in the vehicle yet. So nothing's fixed. So that was actually an inaccurate statement in the post. But in general, it's okay to be critical. I would just be fact-based, and I love Tesla's response. Prepare to be shocked.
Prepare to be shocked. Okay. We also are seeing Joe Techmeyer, who does drone footage of Giga Texas, saw that there's now many Tesla Cybercabs driving without the chase cars. He'd follow one on a portion of testing loop here. They used to have, every time you see one of these, they'd have a chase car, a car behind it, just following along. It's the first time I've observed this over multiple Cybercabs, long duration of the Cybercabs. So he's just following along and watching it, driving everywhere. So maybe that's a signal that things are moving forward. Okay. So we've got Model Y. This is obviously that was launched in simultaneously, not only in China, was in maybe 13, 14 days ago by now, but it was also now launched in North America, 2 factories, Fremont in Giga Texas and in Giga Berlin. Here's Sawyer creating a list of all the changes. I'm not going to go through this. I just wanted to show folks that there's a lot of changes, not just how it looks on the front part, but the inside. Again, I'm not going to go through all this. I'll drive through this so that you can pause it if you are interested in seeing this list. It is just a significant long list here. I'm just going to keep going through it. So many. Boom.
It's
boom,
what
boom.
you do. It's what you do, Herbert, when you have the best product. You have the highest volume vehicle, the highest volume automobile SKU. This is what you do. Some people are like, Tesla just, it looks, first off, it's not minor. The entire front and the entire rear and were changed. And then all the interior details were changed. So it's not minor. This is what you do. You have a winner. What you don't want to do is you don't want to take the winner and make it a loser. So you take things, you refine the exterior, you make it current, you make it look like I'm getting something new, like this is the newer thing. And then on the inside, you focus on comfort, you focus on all those things you can do. Now that you're at scale, those things that would have costed you a lot more money in Q1 of 2020 when you were launching the original Model Y and you were designing it in 2019, and early 2019, you probably locked down all the materials and all the design choices for the Model Y. Those things would have costed a lot more back then than they do now because you've created the highest volume SKU in the marketplace. So now Tesla can look at their feature value trade-off and say, I can make the rear seats power. I can do this. I can add the screen. I could do all these changes that increase the comfort, increase the usability and performance of the vehicle, and give that value back to the consumer without raising my COGS precipitously, because now I am operating at the scale of 25,000 a week and not 2,500 a week, where when I originally launched this thing, I didn't know if it was going to be a massive winner or not. So that to me is the big takeaway. You don't want to change too much. You want to change enough on the outside. You want to simplify the things that the consumers don't see. So if it's a number of parts in the chassis, which by the way will improve ride quality and build quality and so forth, you want to simplify and reduce COGS, but then you want to exploit your volume position you have so you can add to the feature value trade-off tree and add a bunch of features and things that consumers like, and then but not get the massive COGS hit. So I think this thing at scale is going to eventually be cheaper than the current Model Y, and certainly cheaper than the original Model Y when it launched.
That's a massive long list. And you of all people can actually go down that list and know how much potentially this is going to, estimate how this is going to impact margin, as you're saying, because it's reuse of parts, it's scale, and so forth. So a couple of points. Number one, it's simultaneous launch. I want to ask you about that. That's incredible. Here's the launch in the US. And Joe Techmeyer said that they're beginning the new Model Y production, Giga Texas. A few dozen new Model Ys as a test run will be produced. Then over the next couple of weeks, full production should begin. Bringing a new model online across 3 countries, 4 plants, nearly simultaneously is a big win for Tesla. Tesla released a video. I'll play that. They also released another video of the new Model Y being built at Giga Berlin. And there's now videos of Chinese car reviews, and they're all very positive. The people on the ground there are saying that the Chinese car reviewers, the big ones, are saying that this is such a fantastic car that bodes well. It's all coming to China all over again. So I'm going to play these videos, and while I do that, why don't you speak a little bit to, the simultaneous launch and what's happening?
Yeah, so this is a progression for Tesla. I was critical of them last year on the Model 3 launch. When you don't launch simultaneously and you have a high running product like this or the Model 3, you cause issues for your buyers in the regions that it's not launched in. You have your purchasing teams ordering 2 different sets of materials for an extended period of time, and it's not what you want. When you have something like this, you want to, and it's a global hit, it's a global product, you want to relaunch it globally. So Tesla did it. This is, this is not nearly simultaneously, it's simultaneous, and let me explain that. Basically, the launch dates are all within a week or 2 or within the same month. That's a you have the physics of like material movement and things you just can't, you can't go around the way they could have made it on the same day if they wanted to launch everything on the last day, which is not a good thing you do when you're ready. The point is get everything ready as quick as possible, and if it's within a few weeks, it's simultaneously. You wouldn't want to take a factory that's ready and delay it for the other ones just for a couple of weeks. So this is a simultaneous launch. It's a big deal because, number one, Tesla is moving out the old inventory of the Model Y. We saw the big drawdown to the 12 days of inventory. Most of that is again Model Y in waiting, and by them doing that, that to me, that takes the balance sheet risk of these major transitions off the table. Many companies struggle with doing these large global transitions because you end up stranding raw material, because now that you've launched the new one in the region and it's there and it's an available supply, the older ones people are just, they're not going to purchase as much. Now let me explain what's happening, because there are both versions of the Model Y available. What Tesla's done is they've bundled this launch edition, and it's very smart. What they're doing here is they don't have, the new Model Y is not running at 25,000 units a week. That's what the old Model Y roughly runs at in terms of supply. So until it gets to the 25,000 units a week, the new Model Y, they're starting with this launch edition, where if you take the unit economics of the vehicle and you say, here's all the metal bending, here's all the hardware, here's all the bucket of components to make the car, here's a transformation cost to make the car, and here's my, roughly, 20% gross margin, typical Model Y. Now you're in startup mode, your velocities are slower, your process times are slower, your yields are lower. Yields are how much materials input, how much good stuff comes out. So when you're in that position, that's a drag on your COGS. A drag in an unfavorable way means it increases them. And so when you're at that point in time, having the launch edition, what they did is they bolted on things to the unit economics that essentially have 70-80+% gross margin on them. And when you do that, now you've taken the aggregate gross margin of the offering and you've taken it way up. And when you do that, it allows you that time or that area under the curve to go solve those yield issues, solve those process time issues, and just get the supply base in your factories all up to the 25,000 unit, or on its way to the 25,000 unit a week run rate. And it's a brilliant approach, because if you're in region, you're a customer, you can go out and buy this fully loaded brand new Model Y that has everything that would be more expensive if you outfitted an old Model Y with all those same features. But so people have the choice, but they don't have the choice to get a base Model Y yet, a new Model Y yet, when the old one's still in region. So they're going to flush out all that inventory. And again, this is the only way you do it. You can't you can't be on a knife's edge and say, I've got rid of everything and the new one starts on that day. There's going to be some overlap. So I think they've handled it from a sales perspective. They've handled it beautifully, that they're going to be able to get rid of the old excess and then be able to scale the new one in the gigafactories and give themselves time by bolting these very, very high gross margin elements that only Tesla can do, by the way. Only Tesla can sell you FSD at that very high gross margin and bolt that onto the offering. And then some of these other things that Tesla can do. I'm sure there may be, who knows, there could be supercharger deals, but Tesla has the ability to add these things and bundle them. So when they launch these vehicles and they're at relatively low rates in the factory, their COGS are high. This would be a real balance sheet risk for Tesla, but the way they're handling it, it's going to be actually, I'm not saying it's zero risk. I'm just saying it's going to be much, much smoother based on the things that Tesla can offer in the launch. So the global simultaneous launch is big. That's tremendous coordination on the engineering side, tremendous coordination on the supply chain side, on the gigafactory side, and of course on the sales and the way that the product is sold through in channel and explain to customers in a way of these salespeople are incentivized to get rid of the old product and to bring up the new product. And that's the flywheel turning and doing everything you want.
Amazing for Tesla to show, right? Multi-factory simultaneous launch. Great. So far, not cannibalizing management of inventory for the old Model Y, new one. It's going to bode well, I think, and all the new changes for the Y. Okay, so let's talk about this very important topic here. You have a very interesting post about how the U.S. might be able to deal with the existing incentive, whether or not they're going to replace it, remove it. But you're suggesting it could actually be a new made in the U.S. credit that's going to come and replace that. And that's going to be good for companies like Tesla and battery companies like EOS as well. So you have this post on your X account that I thought it was really good. I won't go through all of it. You can explain it. But basically, there's this scenario that you're going to place where you think that the IRA will be a repeal and replace. So they will repeal it first.
It's not showing yet, Herbert.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you for telling me that. And the repeal and replace, but then there will be this thing that will support U.S. vehicles. It makes sense what you're saying. You said the green, you're calling it the green new scam IRA will be repealed. Yeah. And replaced with a made in USA credit. I really like this idea. I think it makes sense. Why don't you explain to people what you're expecting here?
Yeah. So it's important to follow the logic because right now X is just full of hot takes. And the hot take is Trump's going to blow up everything EV, everything renewable storage, and it's, drill baby, and that's it. And then boom, there's a weight on all these names, and there's kind of a weight in terms of like what we're doing. And what I'm trying to do is break down what I think could actually be happening. And I've done my own research, and I'm also leveraging some research that's been done by others, and I reference that below. But if you go to the top, I call it this TLDR, too long, don't read. This is kind of the, kind of the Bay Area, Silicon Valley term of like, you want to put a little header on something. And I don't think this can't be an outright repeal, and I'll explain why. And I also think that this is a rebranding effort by the president. That's what it will turn into. He's going to find out that he can't fully repeal it because he won't have the votes. And then what he's going to do is turn it into a rebranding effort. And these companies that make stuff in the USA, whether it's EVs or regular cars or batteries or whatever, if they make it in the USA, they're going to have some sort of credit system that allows the original investment and staffing of those factories to maintain and continue its growth trajectory. So if we read through just some of the quick points in the post, Herbert, 80. I don't know if you can put that up on the screen or not. 80% of these new battery factories, and I had a chart, a table on this. I can find it and post it somewhere. But they're in places like Tennessee, Kansas, Nevada. They're in places that are red or purple states, which means in districts, the districts themselves. It could be in a purple state, but meaning it can swing Republican or Democrat, but it's in a red district in terms of how that district voted for Republicans. And the point is with all these new battery factories, it's a very smart thing actually, built in these very important areas from a voting perspective. and I'll mention EOS again, which I'm long in, is built in Turtle Creek, Pennsylvania. Everybody knows Pennsylvania is a pivotal state from an election perspective. So you have to me, this is the second and third order thinking you have to go through. Most of the battery factories are in red states and districts. There's only going to be a net 2-seat majority in Congress. So Congress has 435 seats. I think on election day on November 5th, I think people thought like, oh, there was it's a sweeping win across the board, the Congress, the Senate, the presidency. The answer is yes, technically, but it's not some 10 or 15 or 20 seat majority. It started as 5, and between either resignations or people that President Trump pulled into his cabinet that were Republican seated in Congress, he's pulled like the NSA director was a Republican congressman. The ambassador to the UN, she was a Republican congresswoman. He's pulled them into his administration, and now those seats they don't have that advantage, and they could potentially they'll be up for re-election. So during this critical period, there's only going to be a 2-seat advantage in Congress. So remember, Congress, how a law is, IRA is a law, and you'd have to get Congress to write a new law and pass it through the House and then through the Senate, where there's only a 3-seat majority, and then to the president's desk. And of those, and in Congress, even with only the 2-seat majority by the Republicans, 14 of those Republicans wrote a letter in August to the Speaker voicing their concern and voicing their support for the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, the battery credits. I don't know if you have that, Herbert, or it's in a post below my tweet. But anyway, there's a letter, and they all signed it. This shows the green versus red, and then I have a post below that actually shows on congressional letterhead the letter that was written to the Speaker of the House saying, "Hey, we're supporters of this." So I think here's the net of it. Those 14 Republicans are not going to vote to do an outright repeal of manufacturing and battery factories and support that's in their district. That would literally be putting their constituents out of a job. And all this upfront investment already happened. People have hired and factories are ramping. So what I think this will turn into is a repeal and replace. The Trump administration and President Trump himself have called it the IRA or the Green New Deal, the Green New Scam. And they would like nothing more to say that I repealed it. So what they could do in one bill is a repeal and a replace. And they could repeal what they call the Green New Scam, which gets rid of the Inflation Reduction Act name and the credits themselves. And then to get those 14 Republicans that are on the side of the IRA now over to their side and say, look, we're not going to have the Inflation Reduction Act. We're not going to have this thing called an EV credit. We're going to have a made in the USA credit, and we're going to have, a credit. So the credit USA manufacturing, and then credit consumers potentially. Now I'm reaching, but replace the consumer credit with a made in the USA credit on that side. So I think it's important to do second and third order analysis of these things. Bottom line, the president doesn't have the votes in the House today to just repeal the IRA. And secondly, there are 14 Republicans that have battery factories, that have manufacturing of assemblies and other things in their districts that are supportive of it and would not support an outright repeal. So I think it's going to be a repeal and replace. And I think that benefits companies like Tesla and like EOS because of their high percentage. Every Tesla on the road today in the United States is built in the US. 1 in 3 GM, Ford, Stellantis are not built on the road in the US today, are built in Mexico or Canada, or have a high part count of subassemblies coming from Mexico into the US for final assembly. Tesla has some risk, but they have the highest percentage of US local manufacturing of any of the automakers. They're usually in the top 5. And they have all of their final assembly in the U.S. for all their U.S. made vehicles. And this was part of the reason why Elon made the decision to put a hold on the Mexico factory. So to me, all these pieces are fitting together. And I think there's a path here for repeal and replace.
I love it. Thank you, Jeff. I mean, your experience, and this is fantastic. I really agree with you. This is going to happen. It's going to be replaced with this made in the US credit. And so that also protect the battery makers. They'll protect Tesla, it'll protect anybody who wants to make factories here in the US.
Yeah,
Very much
I want to
appreciate
credit,
that.
and I want to credit some of the EOS community and Bert. We put his post up, but he did a lot of the research in terms of which Congress people signed that letter and then how they actually landed in terms of their election. And that got us down to the 14 seat Republicans that are supportive of the IRA that are seated right now in Congress, and they only have a 2-seat total majority. I think that's really important context.
Yeah, absolutely. Follow Jeff and check out that post. Go to his X account. Maybe you'll pin it. Go to his X account at the Jeff Lutz. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.